In this video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly how I use repricers to massively multiply my sales and help save a ton of time on my repricing. If you're new to the channel, my name's Warner Fields from Fields of Profit. I'm a full-time 7-figure Amazon seller. In this video, I'm going to be specifically going into a software called BQool, which is a repricing software. Basically, the way these softwares work is they will kind of monitor the prices of your items overnight. We can just set up some very simple rules that I'll jump into in this video. And once you have those rules set up, it's going to automatically manage your repricing for you. So whenever it finds opportunities for it to lower the price to continue making sales or raise the price so you can be even more profitable, it's going to do so. And the tool that I use to do my repricing is $25 a month. So it's super affordable and it makes sense to get it once you start selling $1,000 or $2,000 on Amazon. But if you're brand new to the channel or want even more free resources to learn how to sell on Amazon, linked directly beneath me is going to be our completely free Amazon seller Discord community. There's over 30,000 people in there sharing a ton of free information. Would love to see you in there, but let's go ahead and jump into the video. So I've gone ahead and jumped into the back end of this software called BQool, and I'm just going to briefly show you how it works. So for example, this item right here is an item we sold, you can see 2019, we were selling this book. And so when I'm looking at this item, I can see a couple different data points as I'm looking through here. So number one, something that's really nice, if you use Inventory Lab, BQool will integrate your costs. So all these costs were auto-populated from Inventory Lab, which is really nice to see. The next column, the next kind of information that you need to worry about is the minimum price here. There's also the maximum price, obviously. So the way that these min and max prices work is, in this case, for this repricing rule, it's going to keep the price between $14 and $32 at all times, no matter what. And then beyond that, I get to select my own custom repricing rule. So you can see a bunch of different repricing rules that I've made. And these are all the options that I choose from. For this video, we're just going to be talking about these specific rules-based repricing rules. I use AI repricing on a lot of items. That plan is $100 a month versus $25 a month for the rules-based. And the rules-based is really all you need until you get to, I'd say, $20,000 to $25,000 a month in sales. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to set up these rules. I'll show you exactly kind of the back-end strategies that I'm using in my repricing rules. And as you're repricing your inventory, you're just going to want to make sure that the minimum price is set somewhere around kind of the reasonable range that you want that item to sell for profitably. And then personally, I'll put my maximum prices at the highest price that that item has consistently sold for. You can see both of those things on a Keepa chart. So now that we have talked about that, so this example right here, this item BQool knows we paid $8 for, so that's good. It's going to track, make sure we're actually making profit and all that good stuff. The minimum price, this item is always going to stay between $14 and $32. And for the rule here, I went ahead and selected maximize profit. And this is the rule that I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to set up. It's just the name that I selected for this rule, but let's go ahead and jump into it. I'll show you exactly what I'm doing when I'm repricing my inventory. So when you jump into the back end of BQool here, it's going to take you through the process of creating a rule. So if you want to follow along as we make this repricing rule and go ahead and set up BQool, directly beneath me, there is a link for a 14-day free trial. So go ahead and activate that. That helps out the channel as well. And then let's go ahead and jump in and start setting up this repricing rule. So within the repricing rules folder, you're just going to be able to create a rule. And this is where we get to right here. I just left it as the default name a long time ago, and that's how it stayed. So name it whatever you want, something that you'll remember. So beyond that, we're going to go ahead and start talking about specifically what this rule does. So for this rule, I compete with Buybox competitors. If you don't know what that means, when you're shopping on Amazon, if you ever see a button that says add to cart, they're in the Buybox. That's where the sales are happening. And that's where we really want to focus our efforts, because the lowest price is not always where sales are happening. The buy box is where sales are happening. So it's really important that we reprice based on the buy box and not the lowest price. So for our competitors, I'm going to be choosing Amazon, FBA, and then non-featured FBA. I don't want to compete with these merchant fulfilled sellers. They have slower shipping time, and so they're going to be less prioritized for the buy box rotation. So I'm only concerned with competing with FBA sellers. Down here, this SFP just stands for seller fulfilled prime. You won't run into very many sellers doing this, especially in the arbitrage world. I set them as FBM. You could try setting them as FBA, but again, you probably won't run into that many seller fulfilled prime sellers within doing the arbitrage. You can also exclude specific sellers. So if you are a bookseller, there was a couple booksellers back in the day when I was selling books, they'd always tank a bunch of the listings. If you're finding the same thing within your niche, if you're doing arbitrage or wholesale, you could exclude that seller ID and it would not follow them if they're racing to the bottom, tanking prices, whatever. You know, we can exclude sellers with free shipping and expedited shipping. I do exclude sellers who have low feedback, so less than 80%. And if they have less than one review, they're a just launch launch store, so they're a little bit deprioritized for the buy box. So I don't personally compete with those storefronts. And then I also, this is really important, you want to exclude sellers with back ordered product. This basically just means if you ship off inventory to Amazon, as soon as it begins the process of getting off to Amazon, especially as it starts checking in at the warehouse, it's not necessarily going to have that 2-day prime delivery time, but it is going to be available and customers could buy it, but they're going to have to wait until it gets done shifting through fulfillment centers and all that good stuff. So if we have it in stock, 2-day prime shipping, that's not our competition. So we definitely want to exclude those guys. And then you can also base on item condition and handling time. If you're doing books or a category like that, that could be pretty useful here. So let's head on to the next things we want to talk about here. If the buy box winner is found between our min and max, that's kind of our ideal situation, right? So if the buy box is above our min, that means we definitely want sales there. That minimum price, we're happy with getting sales, so we want it to follow that for sure. And this is really big. For whatever reason, BQool defaults to doing buy box price minus 1 penny. You definitely don't want to do that. You want to match the buy box price, because if you go to the buy box price and you do minus 1 penny and that person also is doing minus 1 penny, guess what's about to happen? You're both about to go all the way down to your minimum prices, because you're just going to get into a price war and your reprices are algorithmically fight each other until you're both at your minimum prices. So match the buy box price. There's even a case for doing plus 1 penny, for example, if you're competing with a bunch of price tankers or anything like that, and that would kind of offset it there as well. When the buy box winner is below minimum price, this basically just means for auto compete, what this means is we can even open up the example here. So let's say the buy box winner is at $10, my minimum's at 11, max price at 15. I would want to compete with those guys who are within my min and max price. I don't want to follow that guy down to $10 because I told BQool that I don't want to sell it for $10. So within that, your software is going to start competing with those other sellers who are within your price range, so that as soon as that buy box winner goes out of stock, you're sitting right there ready next in line to go ahead and claim those sales. If buy box winner is the minimum price, again, we're just matching those buy box prices, so we want that to be minimum price. If buy box winners are above max, I just want to set it at that max price. I consciously set my max prices. Some other people will just put their max prices at $9.99 and be off to the races. I like to set it at something that is going to be super profitable, but is still actually going to sell. If winners are below the minimum price, I just want to leave it at the minimum price. Don't want to do any crazy tanking. I prefer to do that kind of manually, reviewing my repricing over time, all that kind of stuff. And then if buy box winners are below min and above max, that'd be a really weird case where, maybe your range is set really small. I would just use minimum price because, again, a competitor is below my minimum. So that's going to be a very similar rule to the one we use here. If no one owns the buy box, I am not repricing with this specific rule, at least, because if we find a listing where no one owns the buy box, we're going to use a different repricing rule. That's that second rule I mentioned we're going to talk about. So we'll get a little bit more into the weeds there. If you're the only seller, I want to use my max price. I want to make sure that I've done my research beforehand. And if someone's in this example, if someone's going to pay $15 consistently for it, I want to sell it for $15 all day long. And then if buy box winners are excluded by your settings, I'm not sure how this would even happen if something slips through the cracks. I just personally don't reprice. Again, you're going to catch a lot of things that are slipping through the cracks or doing anything weird. You're going to catch that as you're clicking through BQool, doing that little bit of manual reference work, making sure, once a week or once every other week, however often you want to check BQool and get really into the weeds, you're just going to want to make sure you're catching stuff like that. And really, the more often you can check, the better. So let's go ahead and keep rolling on down here. So price change safety net, if you are kind of averse to the idea of using a repricer and you say, hey, when the price is lowered by, more than we could punch in 10% there, don't reprice it. That way, the repricers are never going to cut a ton of your profits out. Like, especially if you're brand new to using a repricer, it might feel pretty scary to leave your profits in the hand of a software. And, if you've never used it before, it's scary. So if you want to turn this on, it's a good feature. Keeps you from tanking your prices with rules that you didn't know you had and all that good stuff. Right here, if adjusted price equals or below min price, very similar to this up here, I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to the minimum price. And then you can also set up some advanced settings here. One use case for this would be, for example, the first thing in here is, a special case. So in this example, we are the FBA seller. And then if we're competing with Amazon, this repricing rule would completely override everything else. So a quick use case for this, I don't really use this very often. I'm actually going to go ahead and flip these off. But a quick kind of use case that I could think of for this would be that if we're competing with Amazon, they don't share sales with third-party sellers. Pretty much the only way that you can get sales on a listing that Amazon is also on is if you undercut them significantly. Sometimes they will share the buy box, but it's pretty rare, especially if you're just starting out. You're going to just, as a general rule of thumb, you're going to need to undercut Amazon by a pretty good amount. So in this case, I would say, if my competitor is Amazon, I'll take my buy box price and I'll cut 5% or something like that. 10%, 15%, whatever it takes for Amazon to give up some of those sales to us. You might even have to experiment with that a little bit. But ideally, you've done your research beforehand and don't end up competing with Amazon pretty much ever. So let's go ahead and head on to the next bit of this rule. So this next rule here is going to determine how BQool behaves when we have the buy box. So for that last step, we were figuring out all the little steps that we're going to have to do to claim the buy box. So we want to be the one who's sitting in that button that says add to cart. We want to be the one getting those sales, obviously. So once we are that guy who's sitting in the buy box with the add to cart button, if you have the buy box, I always want to be trying to sneak the price up. So in this case, I'm going to be maximizing my profit. And what this is going to do is it's going to test and see how much it can raise the price while you still maintain the buy box. So basically it's going to find the highest possible price that your other competitors are willing to work with, basically. And then that's going to maximize your profit. So I set it to maximize profit within a penny, which basically it's just going to try to inch up pennies at a time, sneak its way up. And then this is kind of similar as before. We're just going to base it off max. And then our competitors are still FBA and Amazon. Again, you've got that price change safety net if you want to do something like that as well. So then this next step of the process is something that you probably won't see anywhere else. This is something that I've been testing recently. It's been something that I've kind of heard other people talking about, but it's been working pretty well for us. So on all of your listings, you're going to be able to schedule your items to do whatever you want at whatever time of day. And something that I've seen to kind of be extremely valuable in this aspect is, for example, on this repricing rule, every day at 3 a.m., we raise our prices by 5% and then we lower them back down, or we re-enable repricing is basically the way it works. So it pauses our repricing. So our sales are going to really slow down between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., which is fine. Not a lot of Amazon customers hanging out at 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. So what this does is it pauses our repricing. And then as soon as it pauses the repricing, it raises all of my prices by 5%. And then the reason for that is, especially on a listing where let's say you only have one other competitor who's FBA, their repricer is probably going to follow you up. And then at the end of that 1 hour at 4 a.m. or whatever, your repricer is going to turn back on, except now your competitor is also going to have followed you 5% up. And so there's not going to be a ton of listings where this kicks into effect, especially if you're on a listing with 50 to 100 sellers. There's no way all of them are just going to follow you up overnight. But especially on those listings where there's not very many sellers, and if a lot of sellers started doing this, it would definitely be good for our profits. It gives your items some time to breathe and lets those prices recover, especially if you've been experiencing any price tanking, that kind of stuff. So if you're not already doing this, go ahead and give it a try. Raising your prices overnight has been pretty useful. Again, on those low competition items, it tends to be way better. But again, if a lot of us did it, it would massively pay off. And then that's pretty much it for this rule. This is a very simple rules-based rule. We're basically just trying to claim the buy box, sit in the buy box, and then do whatever we can to raise the buy box price. That's the goal of all of us as Amazon sellers, right? So within that, I want to go ahead and break down this next rule here. Again, I briefly talked about how this rule is a little bit different when there's no buy box. So if you go to a listing and there's no button that says add to cart, there's no buy box, it's buy box suppressed. A lot of people will stay away from those listings. Generally, they do have slightly slower sales, but a lot of times the buy box is suppressed because Amazon thinks the prices are too high or whatever, something like that. And so a lot of times those listings can be really profitable. If Amazon's thinking the prices are too high, then that's obviously a good opportunity for us to go in and make profit. So if there's no buy box, we need this rule to behave a little bit differently. That other one is very based on the buy box, right? So that very first step, we selected buy box here. In this case, we would want to be picking lowest price. Do not activate this rule unless it's on a listing with no buy box. If there is a buy box and you're activating a rule based on the lowest price, you're going to be selling well below what you need to be selling it for it to get sales. So this rule is very similar. All of these settings are pretty much the same here. There's not really any major difference. And again, here, when the competition is between min and max, we want to make sure our competitors' prices are being matched. Based on the last step, our competitor now, instead of being the buy box, is the low FBA sellers or the low Amazon seller, whichever would be lower out of those two. So we just want to match those prices. The rest of this is all pretty much the same. This FBA versus Amazon rule, I went ahead and threw on that minus 5% here, like I was talking about earlier. For this next step, it doesn't really matter. A lot of these items are going to never get the buy box. If the buy box were to ever come back to this listing, obviously I would want the profit to continue to sneak its way up, right? So I'm going to do the exact same rule here. Moving on to the next thing. Again, just raise your prices at 3 a.m. I guess this one was on 10%. Just raise it 5, 10%, whatever increment you'd feel like is working for you, just as long as your stuff isn't going to stranded and then unstranding and, don't want any headaches with that. So this rule is very similar. Pretty much the only major difference right here is selecting that the lowest price is our competitor and setting up everything else pretty much the exact same. And then as you're going through and setting your repricing rules, so for example, if you're looking through your items, stuff will start appearing as you start shipping it into Amazon. And don't set your repricing rules active until the items arrive at Amazon. There's no reason to be lowering your prices and competing with people who are actually in stock while you're not actually in stock. Their prices might react and lower the prices. There's just a little thing to keep in mind. But as you're scrolling through here, your listings are going to start popping up. So then as you're clicking through each item, you're going to just manually set the minimum and maximum price. So for example, just showing you how I would reprice this particular book. This is a little bit out of the ordinary. It was in used condition. We can see the used price was about $30 pretty consistently. So on this item, I would set my minimum price to be, especially based on profitability, I would set my minimum price to be, $25, still getting that 46% ROI. Seems to be a pretty reasonable expectation that we could sell this item for $25. So I would go ahead and throw 25 on the min, and then up here I would put, you know, maybe 40 bucks as my max. I don't want to go above Amazon's price, but that's really what I would do to go ahead and set this up. In this case, I'm not sure if there is a buy box. So this was a used book. There's no used buy box here. So this would be on the no buy box rule. You know, it's a book, so it's a little bit of a weird example, but that's kind of how I would decide my minimums and maximums. Then you're just going to go ahead and pick whichever rule applies. In this case, if you have just those two rules right now, I'm just going to put the buy box rule if it has a buy box, and then no buy box if it doesn't have a buy box, and you'll be good to start pumping some sales from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got a ton of value out of it. Once again, if you did want to go ahead and check out a free trial of BQool, there's going to be a link down below for that. Helps out the channel. I really appreciate that. Let me know if you guys have any questions or comments, anything like that. I'm always happy to answer those down below as well. But I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time.